It's been more than 2 years since PT was first announced at Gamescom 2014 and made publicly available for download on the PlayStation Network. This haunted house trek was a sensation the moment it was released. It's grim, shocking, gruesome, unnerving, and 1,000 other adjectives, none of which quite do it justice. It's nightmare fuel, and it's all the more memorable for it. When the game's final puzzle was solved and the curtain was raised, PT was revealed to be a playable teaser for the next entry in the beloved horror series, Silent Hill. The brakes officially came off the hype train. Video game auteur and merry prankster Hideo Kojima headed Silent Hills, alongside Mexican film director Guillermo del Toro, well known for his surreal and visually striking cinematography. The Walking Dead's Norman Reedus was in a starring role, and famed Japanese horror artist Junji Ito was contributing design work. So let's recap. We have one of the industry's premier game directors working with one of the best-loved cult filmmakers of our time for an extremely well-regarded game series, in a game starring a hella popular TV actor and featuring art by one of the greatest creative minds working in the horror genre today. It bears saying that this is a staggering amount of big-name talent for a single video game, almost like they were trying to assemble the equivalent of a 70s rock supergroup. Now, video games are always collaborative works by dozens or even hundreds of people, and I don't believe you can reduce a single work down to the influence of just a handful of big names. That said, I think it's equally true that artists possessed by a strong creative vision can directly shape a work. Well-known faces and names are useful as marketing bullet points in order to move product, but they also help humanize games. Our understanding of a game as the result of a creative, authorial process is one more way we can relate to it. This is why expectations had risen so high for Silent Hills, and why what happened next was particularly heartbreaking. In mid-2015, Kojima was fired from Konami, and the game was put on indefinite hold. And with Konami's shift away from big-budget releases in favor of the mobile and gambling markets, the Silent Hills project was essentially killed. PT was pulled from the PlayStation Network and can no longer be downloaded. It was an incredibly bitter end to both Kojima's 29-year tenure at Konami and the Silent Hill franchise. At E3 2016, just shy of 2 years from when PT was released, Capcom released the Resident Evil 7 teaser demo. Like PT, there was no grand, weeks-long marketing rollout. The release was simple and unceremonious. You can download it on your PS4 now. Go play it. It's funny how this mirrors the trend among big-name music stars to do a sudden, unannounced release of an album or mixtape. Credit where credit is due, it was Beyoncé who showed how this strategy is both a way to generate a huge amount of hype and press without a major marketing buy-in, while also giving your fans a sense of ownership over the album experience. There was something beautiful and democratizing about how audiences and critics digested Beyoncé's self-titled album all at the same time in late 2013. I think this same magic was at work with how we all experienced PT, and now RE7, after the surprise release. This concept of a shared experience was even baked into PT's metagame, with the final puzzle's multilingual fragments designed with the intent that players in different countries would have to collaborate in order to solve them. Now, the Resident Evil 7 demo is a solid enough concept that's fun and entertaining during its fairly short runtime. Just like PT, you navigate in first person through a spooky haunted house, tackle environmental puzzles that have semi-abstract solutions, all while stalked by a gruesome figure straight out of your nightmares. The game knows what genre it's operating in, and embraces the camp that comes with this brand of grimy, gritty horror.
So, why are we in hell this time? Do you ever prep? What's the prep? Shitty house, spooky sounds? Ooh, is it haunted?
Where PT was all about turning Japanese horror tropes up to 11, RE7 favors a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Southern Gothic aesthetic. The RE7 demo is directly, overtly modeled on PT, from the way it was released through to the gameplay and presentation. But the moment I started playing Resident Evil 7, I started thinking about something entirely different from the game itself. I thought about Jodorowsky's Dune. This 2014 documentary is a biographical look at Chilean experimental filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky. It explores his career and his failed adaptation of Dune, the legendary sci-fi novel by Frank Herbert. By the mid-1970s, Jodorowsky had achieved cult status with his surreal, often violent and unsettling filmmaking. Despite admittedly having never read Dune before beginning production, Jodorowsky says he was entranced by the book's overtly psychedelic themes, and he jumped at the chance to direct it.
I wanted to make something sacred, free, with new perspective, open the mind.
Now, the production and design crew Jodorowsky assembled for Dune was a roster of super talented and forward-thinking artists. There was sci-fi illustrator Chris Foss, flesh and metal maniac H.R. Giger, the influential cartoonist Moebius, special effects expert Dan O'Bannon. And then there were the actors and the musicians, Orson Welles, Salvador Dali, Pink Floyd. But despite years in pre-production and more than $2 million spent, and remember, this was the 1970s, the project ultimately failed to find enough funding, stalled out, and was cancelled. It's fair to say that much of the fault lies squarely on Jodorowsky's shoulders. His script for Dune would have translated to a 14-hour-long movie. Jodorowsky's vision might have just been too big, too larger than life to be translated to the big screen. The concept was then given to David Lynch, which resulted in the hated 1984 movie version of Dune. Let's not even talk about that one.
What's in the box?
Pain.
All that's left of Jodorowsky's original vision is what we see in the documentary. Some 3,000 salvaged storyboards, hundreds of pages of illustrations, models, and props. A wild and imaginative vision of a psychedelic sci-fi magnum opus. But Jodorowsky's failed Dune project left behind more than just these design artifacts. The documentary also explores how the artists who collaborated on Dune would continue to work in cinema and go on to define an entire generation of science fiction. Most notably, Giger, Foss, and O'Bannon were all involved in Ridley Scott's Alien. Moebius went on to contribute art to films like Tron and The Fifth Element, and his comic The Long Tomorrow was reportedly a key visual reference for the creation of Blade Runner. And OG Star Wars? O'Bannon was in on that. The associations and inspirations go on and on. Despite being a failed film that never came to fruition, Jodorowsky's adaptation of Dune has echoed throughout the last 30 years of cinema, and its influence can still be felt in some of the most genre-defining sci-fi movies. Maybe you see where I'm going with this. Jodorowsky's Dune and P.T. had remarkably similar runs. Both are visionary works by oddball directors and all-star creative teams, and both are even more captivating now that they only exist in the realm of what if. And even though Silent Hills is cancelled and will never see the light of day, its influence has spread beyond its franchise and is now directly informing new games. The Resident Evil series has been around for more than 20 years and is considered the main rival to Silent Hill among big-budget survival horror franchises. Up until now, every mainline Resident Evil game has been some twist on the third-person action genre. But with RE7, Biohazard, the game is switching to the first-person format and scaling back on gratuitous action in favor of the series' roots, horror and puzzles. The experience teased in the RE7 demo is almost a carbon copy of PT. You're in first person, your character is enclosed in a small home environment, retreading the same area over and over to solve a puzzle sequence, all with an aesthetic and atmosphere that plays on dread and anxiety, rather than cheap jump scares. And beyond RE7, we're also seeing buzzworthy indie games like Allison Road and Visage that cite PT as a direct inspiration. Visage even began as a recreation of PT in the Unreal game development engine and morphed into a full project after Silent Hills was cancelled. Just like Jodorowsky's Dune, PT has begun to influence and inspire its contemporaries. There's something beautiful and encouraging about how the struggle to make worthwhile art can have an impact beyond just the work itself. Everything we do in life ripples outward from us and affects the world around us. Even our failures have value and mean something. Jodorowsky's Dune and Silent Hills may never happen, but their DNA lives on.